As your network automation practice evolves, so should your tools. Don't manage your collections of Ansible playbooks and Python scripts artisanally. Move up to Itential and load your automations onto a scalable platform your whole team can use. Visit itential.com to find out more. That's itential.com. Welcome to Heavy Networking from the Packet Pushers. If you've ever told your network operating system vendor why their API sucks, what you'd like to see instead, and maybe even submitted a PR to make it happen, you found your tribe. On today's show, we have some hands-on network automation with guest Joseph Nicholson. He's been automating at NTT Data for many years now and has some perspective to share. He is a network engineer by trade, not a developer, but when he does engage in acts of coding, he tries to do it right. We are going to discuss his work with Ansible, AI copilots, Python scripting, and more. If you are interested in network automation but are struggling to get started, this might be a very good episode for you to listen to. Joseph, welcome to Heavy Networking. Tell the folks in a sentence or two who you are and what you do.
Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Joseph Nicholson. I'm with NTT Data, and I'm an operations engineer, and I focus primarily on network automation.
Yeah, and we're in Prague. We had to fly across the ocean to get in a room so we could record this.
Right.
We're at the AutoCon 3 event, and so just curious, what attracts you to this event?
So a couple of years ago, before AutoCon 0, one of the guys I know over at Nokia, he suggested I give this conference a shot because they were spinning it up and getting the word out. And I had just started working on network automation like 6 months before that. Well, focusing on network automation full-time 6 months before that. And I gave it a shot and really found my people, I think. And so I've been AutoCon 0 now through 3, and I've been to every one of them. And this is the one conference I'm like, oh, no, I have to go to this. And got to be there.
And you've made the mistake of submitting for talks. So you've actually,
Yes.
You're not speaking at this event, AutoCon 3, but you have spoken at NANOG, you've spoken at AutoCon 2, and that talk was Network Automating in Baby Steps was, I believe, the title. Could you give us some of the key ideas you share in that talk?
Sure. The whole kind of point there was I noticed at many other talks at AutoCon and a few at NANOG that a lot of people kept pointing out to just iterate. And they never really kind of stayed on that, but they kind of talked around it, and you would hear the word iterate occasionally. And I was like, well, somebody needs to say the thing out loud, the real point, which is start small, just do it one step at a time and kind of get there and, eventually come back and redo that step and improve it and make it a little bit better and just kind of, do that. So I had a project I've been working on for 4 or 5 years where I'm collecting data out of the routers for operational counters and stuff like that, stuff that's not common. And over the years, I've noticed what I've done is I was like on middle of version 3, and I've been iterating on it over the years. So I use that one of those 3 repos as an example of just start out small and the few things that I started with, and then on version 2, this is what I added and how I improved it. In version 3, this is what I'm working on to improve it.
Yeah, that is, you don't have to boil the ocean in step 1.
Right,
Just
right.
get something done.
Yeah.
And then keep, by iterating as in, then come up with some improvement and tweak it and go from there.
Right. And when I was doing that project, the big thing for me and one of the points I had to drive across that was that I didn't necessarily know what I was doing when I was connecting to the routers and pulling the data. I started with screen scraping, and then it turned into a project of, let's get netconf enabled across the whole network and start using that instead. And, I went through the hassle of not knowing what I was doing with text FSM, and there are no templates for anything I need because it's all really weird, esoteric operational counters that no one else is looking at, and
What are you doing that's so weird, if you don't mind my asking?
So I was looking at, we've had issues in the past, for example, where our configs are so large, the config database on Juniper's gets full, and I need to be able to scrape and watch that counter kind of go up over time.
Okay, so service provider environment,
Yeah.
and so huge configs because of multi-tenancy and what you're provisioning for various clients, or?
No, huge configs because the ACLs for the prefix list are too large.
Oh,
Those get out of hand really fast. If you look at our configs, that's about 95% of the configs is the ACLs. And over the years, we've requested all the vendors for things like, to reduce because we used to have duplicate lists, the ACL or the prefix list, and then the black hole prefix list as well, right? So the remote black hole prefix list. And we've asked them to give us the ability inside the config to compress that down to 1, and they have all done that now. So our configs basically halved in size every single time we would enable that. And so, but there was a time where that wasn't really the case. And, you know, a config is, in some cases, over 1 million lines. And some other vendors never really tested for configs that large and things like that. So we run into those issues. So I wanted to watch the Junos database size go up or down, and I could go and make a trigger within my stat system going, hey, if it hits 60% or this threshold, give me an alarm, let me know, so I know that we need to pay attention to this. And those kinds of things, nobody else is obviously watching because I guess no one's had the same problem or thought about making a template for it.
So you're going after what, data models via netconf that, you know, there's objects there that no one else is looking at, or are you having to? Do you even have objects or models you could pull from? For that?
Yeah. There's models for it. That's no problem in netconf.
Okay.
The thing is I didn't have netconf enabled, or I didn't know anything about it, so I started with screen scraping and NetMiko as the low-hanging fruit to get into it, because, you know, Kirk Byers on his website has a working example, and it's a copy paste. Oh, hey, that works great. Yeah. And, you know, I just need a template now. And so not knowing anything about text FSM and getting really confused, and the information being out there about how to do it, what it is, and all that's just kind of like, well, I think I found better sources in the last couple of years, but it wasn't great back then when I was looking for it, or I didn't find what I was looking for, and you know, that kind of thing. So,
what is text FSM?
It is a is it a language?
It's a
language.
It's a parser, right?
Yeah, it's parser. I always want to say language, but I think language is not exactly correct. But it's a parsing language, for lack of a better term, using regex to take a piece of output and grab the counters out that you want based on based on regex. But yeah.
So you wanted to get these counters out of routers. You set up netconf. You then have a target that all of this information is going to, and then what happens?
So we go in, and now that I've got netconf set up, I can just hit the endpoint in Juniper with an RPC call and go, hey, look, I just need this information. I'm using Python. I'm sorting through it. I'm grabbing out the 3-4 things I need. I will format it, and I'll send it over to our Kafka bus, and that will put it into our Druid database, and I can use my Pivot UI to pull it up and go, oh, hey, look, this is what it looks like across the whole network.
I like how you throw all these terms around so casually.
I know, right? I know.
Throwing on the Kafka bus. And,
So actually, let's start with Kafka.
Yeah.
That comes up a lot in network automation conversations. Or I shouldn't say a lot. Increasingly, all depending on your use case. So I'm not a Kafka guy. I've read about it. I have some basic idea of architecture, but it's a message bus, and you can subscribe, like a pub sub kind of model where I can observe what's hitting the message bus, something like that.
Yeah, I believe that is the case. I'm not very good with Kafka either. We have a couple of guys on the stats team who are really, really good with that stuff. They're like, hey, here's the code, just format it in this format and send it here. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. Yeah, no problem. And then it works. But yeah, my understanding, Kafka it'll take the messages in. It'll be like a queue as well. And so if you send too much, it'll kind of hold it in place. And then it gets processed. I think we're using PM ACCT in the back end to pull those messages out and to process them, to put them into the database. And I don't have a good definition of PM ACCT either, but Paolo Lucente, who created that, works for us, so he knows what he's doing. I'll just
The
leave
guy
it at
who
that.
created it works
Yeah,
for us, so you know.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. That's fine.
I know people. It's fine.
But the architecture there, the intent is to take messages coming from the network, hit this message bus, and you mentioned an important feature here. It can hold it if they need to be held in a queue for a bit for processing. Then they get sent to a database. And so you're interacting. You actually don't care about Kafka that much, especially as far as you're not interacting with it like you need it to handle message processing. But
Right. I'm just sending data to it, and it does what it does.
you care more about the database side?
Only in this, it depends. I do when I'm developing it, because on the dev side of things, I have the ability to go in and actually set up everything I need to set up, but that's the only time I really care about it. I don't have actually that access on production side, but I could just set up the dev side and go, this is what everything's supposed to look like, and tell them to copy it over whenever they're ready. But other than that, I really don't care about the database either. So
We end up with a result, though, out the
Right,
other end.
right.
After the message has gone through this processing of Kafka, then database, then there's a presentation layer where you're
Right.
consuming the data that you've been pulling out of the network, which looks like what?
That's Pivot UI. It's from a company called Imply. It looks like Grafana a little bit, but not. It's more of you get the basics. You get tables. You can get line graphs stuff and bar graphs, all that good stuff. Same thing. I mostly just use line graphs just because it's a simple
So
representation.
this UI is a product that NTT Data is paying for.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
And was
yeah.
it already being used internally, or how did you come to decide on
No, I think when Paolo joined us, the idea was to take the homegrown stats system into a more modern direction, and he came in with a lot of, I think, some experience in some of these other tools. But that team who handles that system, I think they went through a bunch of UIs and settled on that one as being the one that made sense for us. So.
So who consumes the Pivot UI interface?
Everybody, everybody from the sales team, they have their own data cubes in there where they have a set of data that matters to them, and everybody in the NOC uses it. There's multiple data cubes that they'll use. Our security team will use it. The operations team uses it. Development can kind of go look at a lot of the stuff that I'm collecting personally and putting in there is stuff that not only operations can use to watch out for issues, but development can also look at those. And the network architects can look at that information and go, oh, how is... Because I've sat there and I've broken down all the counters that I'm collecting into not only stuff like MSA, but region and country, but also like platform, OS version, things like that. And so you can look at like, oh, how does this platform handle this particular thing, and you can look at those counters for that platform only compared to other platforms. Some of the stuff I've worked on the last couple of years is doing router upgrades using Ansible and automating that process. And part of that, I realized that since I'm automating it, I have some control over some of the data I'm collecting. Instead of having to rely on a human to do the manual process and collect the data for me, I can do it automatically. So one of the data points I'm collecting and putting into this stat system for operational stats is IBGP convergence timing. And now we know how long it takes for IBGP to converge on a PTX 10008, an MX 10008, a PTX 1000, an SROS or SR1X, an SR1. ASR 9000. So you can see how long it takes on each one. And I've also started recording the amount of time it takes to do the upgrade from start to finish, and you can see the differences on the platforms at that level. And you can even break it down by vendor: Cisco, Juniper, SROS, or Nokia, and get a average out of that. So
You were talking initially about I'm concerned about the size of our config files because
Yes.
there's limitations there. You just described a ton of other data you're gathering
Yeah.
and the usefulness of it.
Oh yeah. And there's even more that stuff like watching the route table sizes across all of the routers and stuff like that.
You bumping up into limits there too?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, we were, but we're not anymore.
Yeah.
We were doing a full IBGP mesh until about 2 years ago still, and in 150, 160 routers, that gets to be, I think the RIB was like 16 million routes. The PTX 1000s weren't happy with that. They've got a 10,000 or 10 million route limit before it start to go crazy on you. But we went to route reflection a couple of years ago. Now we're down to about 8 million routes in the RIB. And that's fine. That's not a big deal. So
it's
all
a
good.
huge deal.
Well, I mean, it's
actually, but
huge, but yeah, it's for the level of our size of our routers, it's not a big deal. Yeah, it's handling it well. So.
And now a brief sponsor message from Itential. If you're like me, your network automation skill set is an evolving one. You've probably done some Ansible and Python work and you've had some quick wins, but now you're getting to that point where you want other people in your team to use the automations that you've built. They're sort of okay with Ansible, right? They're definitely not 100%, but they're okay. However, they do not want to figure out Python, and they can't even manage the library dependencies. Most of the folks on your team, what do they want? They want you to give them a thing that they can run, and it just works. And if it doesn't, any network task requiring automation comes back to your queue. I call this the platform problem. You need a platform that the whole team can use to run automations without them having to know anything about maintaining a Python environment or even how to run an Ansible playbook. And this is the service Itential provides across their product portfolio. You've created a bunch of network automations. All right, now move them from your laptop into a repository and then let Itential execute them in a scalable, secure way that abstracts details from people that don't need to know, while giving access to every nuance for those people that do need to know, people like you. Itential puts you on the road to self-service network automation, allowing anyone you like to run your automation, all while integrating with all the other systems that your organization runs. And to me, this is the ultimate destination for network automation systems, self-service. To find out more about Itential's products and how they help you build an automation platform, visit Itential.com. You can test drive Itential free for 30 days. That is Itential.com.
Let's go back to you were mentioning using Ansible to do router upgrades, and so talk about your process there.
The process of using Ansible, or the process of the upgrade, or the...
Can you give us sort of like a before and after? What was the process?
Oh, yeah,
before you
yeah.
started
So,
automating?
well, funny enough, the process is the same, or should be the same before and after. So router upgrades is something I spent a lot of time. I was in the NOC for a very long time. I was working overnights. I had a lot of, in the US, overnights is a little slower, so I had a lot of time. I did a lot of router upgrades. So in 2012, 2013 timeframe, I started to write the MOP, or the method of procedure, that we would use to manually upgrade all the routers, and it would have all the little quirks for each different platform in it, or things to watch out for and stuff like that. And then a couple of years ago, when I went to start automating it, that's the first thing I started with, since I was still kind of maintaining it, and other people were adding in here and there as well, but it was still pretty much the same
had some
procedure I'd
detailed
already come up
documentation
with.
of
Right.
procedure, yeah.
So what we started with was that, and I started to try and just go, oh yeah, I know how to do an upgrade, no problem, and I'll just automate it now. And I go off and make a bullet points of 5 things, and pre-maintenance steps, remove traffic, maintenance, put traffic back on, post-maintenance steps, going, okay, I'm good, I can automate this. And then when I get into the details, I don't have that list anymore because I didn't bother to make it. And so, yeah, it ended up being one of those things where really quickly I went, oh, no. Go back, start over, let's go to the MOP, and let's make a checklist out of the MOP itself. Let's not forget the details because, my brain is not that great. The reason I wrote it down in the first place is because I can't remember the details. So, but I would start with the MOP, and then I basically automated it from the beginning to the end, step by step.
You had a detailed workflow, that
Yeah.
MOP, that would walk you through everything.
Right.
So you translated that manual process into a fully automated process.
Right, exactly.
What did that look like? Like, how do you get to this long procedural document to push the button?
One step at a time, very slowly, and you iterate, and you do it in baby steps. Circle it back. So
Did you like experiment in labs with the
Oh, yeah.
automation
So we
software?
have a full-fledged lab that has everything we have in the network. I think it even has some of the older stuff we've already removed, still kind of doing some things and helping out, and then we have some future
Hardware
stuff.
or virtual?
Hardware. It's all hardware.
Lucky you. Lucky
Yeah, I
you.
know, right? It's great to work for a large ISP. But we also, even make it even better, we also have a test lab, which is set up to look exactly like a regular POP with almost all the hardware in it. And that test lab is not connected to the lab itself, which is separated from the production network, but the test lab is connected to production. So you get things you can't get in the regular lab, like a full set of the route tables and stuff like that, which you can do in the lab, but it's a lot harder, and it's harder to set up with all the software in there. You can generate traffic and stuff there. I can't generate traffic and test. I'm connected to production. That will get a little dicey, but I can do things like have, transit LSPs and stuff going through routers, and I can program how the router will handle I can make my automation look at that and go, okay, when all the transit LSPs are off this router, then we can move on with our upgrades. Things like that are kind of harder to do without a lot of setup in the lab. And I can't just go do that on production because, that's not a great idea. But so yeah, we have physical hardware we're able to use. I've actually tried to look at using Container Lab the last couple of years, and I think it'd be awesome to do, but a lot of the stuff I'm working on is at the physical hardware level. Like, like a year ago, we had a particular bug in Junos where the PIMs needed to be upgraded, and I needed to make sure I kicked that off and had a nice little workflow in Ansible to upgrade the PIMs one at a time, and it's like a 3 task file loop that it runs through, and I can't kind of do that virtually because the PIMs don't exist, and so I have to do that physically, and
I was thinking about other things that would hit the limits of hardware, in certain boxes, because you guys are pushing those in certain circumstances. That's harder to model in a lab too.
Yeah, oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, even there's some situations like I want Container Lab because I think Container Lab would be great in certain platforms like Nokia, for example. Container Lab being a Nokia open source product, but it obviously works really, really good with Nokia products. But our particular 2 Nokia routers that we use are 7750s, SR1s, and SR1Xs with a 7210 connected as a satellite device. And I can't do that sort of setup inside a Container Lab. And I can't just have a 7750 in Container Lab without the satellite because that's not the setup we use. So it's kind of hard to use it even then for the Nokia product. I've asked them to give me that ability, but that's a little bit harder to do this in some cases. So
I think Roman's here. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I know. I saw him last night. I saw him when he arrived yesterday. I was walking out the front of the hotel when he got out of the car. And,
I know you're just coming out of the car room, but can we talk?
Right.
Just off the plane, but I want to
exactly.
buttonhole you for a minute.
Exactly. But I've talked to I believe his boss or one of the other guys who's the PLM of manageability, James Cummins, about it, and was like, hey, it looks to be really kind of cool because this is the only way we set up our Nokia routers, and it's kind of hard to simulate anything on it if I can't have the other half that's missing. And so, but I do see some, usability. There's some use to it. Like if I needed to, if I'm on a plane or something, I can spin it up and start working on some netcomp stuff, pulling counters and stuff like that. But that's.
So how did you fix on Ansible?
My boss said, "Hey, you should use Ansible." He was looking at it for about 6 months, and he tried to encourage a couple of us to look at it. And I sort of was working on other things, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll get to it." And after 6 months, no one had looked at it, and finally, I was like, "Okay, let me take a look at this." And I started playing with Ansible, and I started to put together a proof of concept playbook. Just I don't work well just kind of playing with things. I kind of want a goal, and so I was like, let me go automate this one process the NOC has. It's collecting TAC output for vendors whenever you open up cases. Over the years, we've got a doc and Confluence for every vendor that says, oh, just collect all this before you open the case and attach it immediately. And so I was like, I can automate this. This is simple, no big deal, low-hanging fruit thing. And I automated that. And by the time I was done with that, I was like, oh, no, I'm all in on this. Let's go. Ansible's awesome.
So you got sort of your feet wet with Ansible before you went to this router upgrade.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Okay. I think I did that and one other playbook before I started doing the router upgrade stuff. But I eventually did ask my boss why Ansible instead of Terraform. And at the time, like 3-4 years ago, Terraform just didn't have a lot of great router support.
Yeah, it's definitely more cloud friendly.
Yeah, exactly.
Hardware.
And by that point, and even now it's even better, Ansible was like a decade old. It was very mature, had a lot of options, had a lot of modules, a lot of support. Juniper's got a lot of good support with their module on it. Nokia is very open with, the community module for Ansible works really, really well with Nokia's. Cisco's a little bit harder. Their module's been, unfortunately, abandoned, and I still can't find the best way to do things with Cisco, but I make it work. But I even then, I was at dinner last night, and one of the guys here, this week, he's going to talk about his experiences with Terraform and using it with routers. And, he kind of gave me the preview that it's not that great just yet. But you can make it work, but it's still it's harder to do. So.
Terraform not open tofu, or is that a distinction that doesn't matter particularly to you?
It doesn't matter to me. So, but yeah, with Ansible though, I'm at a point where it just kind of worked. And so I ran with it, and I can keep making it work, and that's what matters. If I'm not using Ansible, I'm using Python, and Python's one of the other things too. It just keeps working, so I'm going to keep rolling with it until I need to find another solution. I mean, I'm not using Napalm. I'm not using any of that stuff that comes along with that just because I haven't needed to, and everything else keeps working.
So mentally, I'm like seeing your process documentation. Is there sort of a one-to-one between what's in the process documentation and then your Ansible playbooks?
For the most part, for certain processes like the router upgrades, I think what I ended up doing was in a few cases it made sense for the automation to kind of change the order of the steps around a little bit for one reason or another. And so I did sort of redo a little bit of that process in the automation just from that mindset. I think that's kind of expected in the end. But what I did do is I went back as well and I re-updated the manual process to make sure it follows the automation. One of the other things I did is I don't know about you guys, but the NOC, I got a lot of experience with them, and they don't like change because usually when stuff's hitting the fan, it's not a good time to start changing processes. And, it's really hard in that fast-paced environment, that break-fix environment to change things. So one thing I did do was I made sure that the documentation that explained the automation was very clear about what's happening. Anybody who's used Ansible will know that it's a very black box sort of thing, and it's not telling you what it's doing, and it's doing it really, really, really fast. In some cases, you have to literally put in a pause for like seconds to let the router do its thing before Ansible will move on, because Ansible will try to move on before the router's ready, especially when you say reboot, and Ansible goes, next step, and the router's like, I'm going to reboot now. And Ansible's moving along, doing its thing, and all of a sudden it loses connection to the router and crashes. So you got to kind of tell it to Ansible to chill out. It's like the little 6-year-old with ADD. You got to, come on, man, we need to settle down for a second. But so I did make sure that the documentation for some of those things was very well documented. There's a nice little flow chart of like, this is the steps that are happening. And I even made sure that those steps are listed after the task names. And so that they can say, this is what this task is doing.
So
and
is that to help the NOC team feel comfortable with this?
Yeah, exactly. And those task names are matching the steps in the manual procedure as well. So if for any reason the playbook stops and they can't restart it from that step, or there's a problem that prevents them from doing that, they know which step to go to in the manual process to start from. So there's a lot of that, matching going on there.
So this kind of leads into my next question. We had a conversation yesterday where we were talking about automation and operationalizing it, and that means like, can other people use it besides you? Are you
absolutely?
Are the people running your playbooks?
Oh yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah, most definitely. There's a few people who aren't, and the question always like, why when they come like, hey, I got this problem. Well, why didn't you run the playbook? Like that's kind of become the question now, and everyone in the NOC, like one of the things we did, or my boss did at the time, they kind of told the NOC management, it was like, hey, look, this is the method we support now. You kind of page us on call and say there's a problem. We're going to ask why you're not using the proper procedure that we support. And that was one of the things. I know that's a little hard to kind of swallow sometimes, but sometimes you have to sort of like break it off there and go, look, this is the way we do it now. This is what we're providing you. This is the method we think is most consistent, makes most sense. Because going back to recording the time it takes to upgrade a router, I know how long it takes now. It's average about an hour and a half. We have a 3-hour window. Before this process with the manual and the fact that there's like 20, 30, 40 people in the NOC across multiple locations, I think the average amount of time is, I don't know. I know some techs individually, like anecdotally, it would take them 2.5 hours to upgrade a router. And there's nothing crazy happening, Other techs would take an hour to do it. So it's very inconsistent. And now we know it takes about an hour and a half. We have about half the window in case things go wrong. So,
one of the NOCs that I dealt with, they were triage support for inbound customer support calls. Are there automations that you've given to maybe provide the NOC troubleshooting ability or things to help with those customer inbounds?
No, we have not. From my perspective, my team, I'm dealing with operational procedures and processes. There is one of the managers of the NOC. He's working on some automation of some sort for the NOC itself. They have a few scripts that run that will pull data and kind of help them troubleshoot much quicker by by collating the obvious data together in one place as opposed to having to log into 3 or 4 different places to get it. But so far, we haven't done anything with customer service level automation. I do see that there, like you're right, there is a bunch of things that can be done there. All of our tickets, all of our emails go into ServiceNow and get tickets created on them. There's probably workflows that can be created within ServiceNow to take those common tickets and do things with them. My current manager just asked me last week to look at something where I try to figure out a way to grab all of the telco maintenance notifications out of the queue and do something with that so that the human doesn't have to do that. Because that's just common stuff, right? Like you can go, oh, hey, this is what a Lumen notice looks like, what a Zayo notice looks like, level, I was going to say level 3, AT&T, those types of things and do things with them. And, ServiceNow is doing half the job anyway.
I was thinking, just reflecting back on time I spent with one particular organization, we had high-profile clients that we were doing payment card processing, and they would notice if 3 payments didn't make it through for whatever reason and then want an explanation, which across a national WAN, maybe you have an answer, maybe you don't. So we were always working on trying to get tests that were more granular and more robust, so that when they'd call in, so between 2:30 and 2:31 a.m., turns out there was a little hiccup, and give them some kind of an answer so that they'd know what happened and then maybe what could be done about it. Automations that could proactively have that data for your high-profile customers sitting there in case that call came in because they noticed the thing would be, great. Stuff like that. It's just, all the things that you're doing has just spun up my imagination because that you get a taste of it and you start going after that low-hanging fruit and taking your baby steps, and then there's more and more and more that comes to mind that are possibilities. And I'm in my own mind iterating on what would have been interesting in some of the different places I work with.
I actually have a workflow in mind that I don't have the ability to work on the systems that I need to work on to do it, but I have a bunch of ideas as well. This whole automation thing the last couple of years has just spurred that imagination, that problem solving quite well. But one of the things I was thinking about is our alerting system could, one of the common alerts is a BGP session flapping somewhere on the network. It's constant. It happens all the time. There's not always a good reason for it. There's something. And a lot of times it's just for a second or 2 or 3, right? Yeah. It's just a flap and it comes back up and it never has a problem, or it flaps again 12 hours later. And, it'd be really nice if the alerting system could open the ticket in ServiceNow, and then ServiceNow just triggers the scripting to go pull all the data and put it into the thing. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to do anything other than collect the data and let it sit there. And if it happens again, like within X number of hours or days or whatever, go collect it again and then start maybe doing things on it. Like, hey, email the customer, hey, you have some problems with your router? Are you good to go? Because that's really half the time the NOC will look at the output and you look at it and go, it flapped, it was 5 seconds, the interface didn't flap. I don't know what else is going on.
Identify it as a chronic, and now
so you email the customer and go, hey, you good? You need help? And that's kind of it until the customer comes back, oh, yeah, I got a problem on my side. It's all good.
Or on the other end, like me as a service provider consumer, I was typically on the enterprise side. There was one circumstance where we had what we identified as a chronic outage, but it was a gray failure. It would be gone, and then, it's back, you know. And call in, guys, this is happening. Nah, we're good. I don't see a problem. Okay. After several back and forths like that, you keep calling in on this. We're going to identify this as a chronic and keep our eye on it. Thanks. You can't tell me what's wrong? Nah, we don't know. End of the story. Bad line card in something in their CO, that was affecting us. We've identified it, and we're going to swap out the card. And after they swapped out the card, everything was great. But that was months of back and forth and gray failures.
Right.
And, we show that you've called in on this before. Yup, and so on. But an automation that could have correlated all that could have gotten to a point of, we have a bad line card, and gotten that replaced more quickly.
Right, and finding those kinds of issues on the line card side is pretty difficult, but I think ServiceNow will collate all those tickets based on circuit ID, right, or service ID, and if you're collecting a bunch of data when the issue happens. And even if you're sticking in a ticket, you can go back and look at all that data later across 5 or 6 tickets over a month and go, oh, wait, let's see if I can find a commonality here or something going on, you know. I know a company, Selector AI, has a really good product where they will use their AI to collate all the data on the network. And, you know, it looks like a real deal. I've heard some good stories out of it. And one of the guys at AutoCon 2 last fall did a presentation on it and showed how they use it for the
Jeremy, MLB.
Yeah, Jeremy Schulman, he for MLB, and how they do it across all the stadiums and everything else, and it was just amazing to kind of see that in action and go, oh,
Selectors
wow, that's
sponsored
awesome.
Packet Pushers a few times, and we've done some shows with them, and the way they lean hard into training their AI model on your network data specifically. That seems to be the killer.
Yeah, that kind of thing. That's what they're selling essentially, is that ability is to find those problems before they become problems. I know Cisco, like 20 years ago, Cisco Works had that same claim, but I think now, with AI, that's what AI is really good for, is finding sifting patterns through that needle within a stack of needles that you're never going to find, and making those determinations better than we can. And I think that's actually the true power of it. Is
you said Cisco Works and brought some memories back. I had a Solaris box that was running Cisco Works back in the day on a reasonably sizable government network, and I can tell you it didn't do anything like that.
Right.
It did a lot of things.
I was evaluating it for the previous employer and trying to look at it, and I bought into I was much younger at the time and bought into the hype of, oh yeah, it's going to help me proactively figure out the problems. And now today I'm a lot more, hopefully, wiser, and I definitely don't believe that anymore. I don't think any system is going to help me proactively find the problems yet, but I think the AI stuff is getting closer to that.
I'm curious, in the organization, are you sort of like the automation evangelist and kind of like striking out through the jungle on your own, or do you have more executive support or leadership support, or what is the atmosphere like inside the org?
Support's all there from top down.
Okay.
The tooling, we have a tooling team who does all of our configuration management. And they've been doing that for a couple of decades now, and they're kind of the automation team. They build all the tools for that and stuff, but we're getting to a point now where this day and age on the network, and they have so many teams to support that, there's not enough of them to go around, and they have their own full list of things to do, and they're just trying to keep the configuration management system going and providing the support that everyone needs. And so, like myself, I'm looking at this and like all these operational procedures and stuff we want to do. We want to be able to turn up a circuit into a bundle, or make a determination if we need a new bundle or use an existing one. I want to be able to do a router turn up with ZTP and not actually touch anything anymore. I want to be able to do these different things, and those guys are building that database and API to support that, but they don't have time to build the rest of it. And so, like myself and my team, I'm doing it. We had a capacity and planning team, and they had a guy over there who's here with us this week. He was doing some automation tools for them, for specifically in their realm of experience. We got a couple of guys and other teams doing the same thing, that's dealing with stuff within their own team's needs.
So there are automation efforts happening within the org, and it's sort of like team focused, like configuration management automation, and then your operational automation, and then et cetera, et cetera.
Right, exactly. So it's a big holistic thing within our business unit. Is automation is the way we're going to do it.
Did that sort of emerge organically from like, we just don't have enough people to handle all of the work, or top down saying like, I think we can improve processes and make more money if we automate?
Yeah, I mean, it comes from just not having enough people to do it all. Like I said, we started the automation efforts a couple of decades ago. The configuration management system is a home-built system. Now you look around, and I'm literally looking at the Notabots and the infra hubs and all those new systems, and going, I got that. I got some of that already. Like, they're doing a lot of things that we don't have available to us yet, but a lot of what they do is like, oh yeah, we've got that, and it looks very familiar to what we've been doing for a while. But it is, that team is like 10 people. You know what I mean? There's not 100 developers dealing with this, which is what you kind of need if you want to go all in, right?
Yeah.
So, but we're doing the best we can, and it's going to be a long-term journey for us. So,
I was looking at one of your talks, and I think AI copilots came up. Are you working with any kind of an AI at all?
I'm using GitHub Copilot within VS Code.
Okay.
I've been working on that for a few years now. For a couple of years ago, I kind of discounted it a bit. I was using it to, when I write Python, to give me suggestions on what to type next, and kind of occasionally hitting tab and going, yeah, I think that works. About 6 months ago at Nanog in Toronto, one of the directors, I think, or VPs from another team was like talking to me at a dinner and was like, hey, have you looked at this lately? I'm like, nah, I tried it a year and a half ago. It's not that great. It's not there yet. He's like, oh, no, you got to look at it again. And I'm like, okay, I'll look at it. And then, like, after AutoCon 2, I kept hearing about it. I was like, okay, let me give this a shot. Everybody keeps talking about this, like, the last 3 weeks. Like, I got to look at this again. So when I got back from AutoCon 2, I spent Thanksgiving weekend asking Copilot and GitHub, prompting it through scripting to turn up a DWDM shelf within our network using our API. And I got it working over the weekend, and I was like, this has changed. This is different. This is not what I remember. Like,
so you prompt to get code, and then would prompt again to tweak the code if it wasn't working?
Exactly. I just prompt my way through it. Now, I know that sounds like the easy way to do it, but it's definitely not, because Copilot's not perfect, and it's going to make a lot of mistakes. And I even, over the last couple of days, I've been working on a side project since Friday, and it gets in a loop of like, oh, this is not working. Can you tell me what's wrong with it? And oh, yeah, this is what's wrong with it. Let me fix that. And then it still doesn't work, and it gets in this loop of trying to fix the same thing. And the next thing you know, the page has changed like 100%. You're going, what are you doing? Like, you need to stop it back
my experience so far.
Yeah, and so you can get into those ruts where it sort of kind of gets confused. But then the thing is like I can still read the code and look at it, and that's what you got to be able to review it and look at it and make sure you understand what it's doing. Yeah. And so what I did do is I learned I can give it instruction file, and in the instruction file I go, make sure you document everything for me, like put doc strings on every function and everything, and make sure you comment all this so I can follow its logic a little bit better, and also make sure I do understand, like, oh, this is what it's trying to do. Let me go through the code,
which is a stretch, because it isn't really its own logic. It's an LLM, so it's doing completion based on training. So it doesn't actually know what it's doing.
No, but I needed to explain what it thinks it's doing.
Yeah.
So I make sure I'm looking at it and going, yeah, okay, this is what it thinks it's doing. Yes, it is doing that. Okay, it's the next thing. Let's go down. And there's a couple of times where I look at the code and I go, okay, hey, dude, you've been spinning on this too long. This is where your problem's at. Oh, yeah, you're right. The problem is there. Also,
it's always so agreeable.
I know.
I know. Well, you're right.
But it also never takes the blame either. It's always like, yeah, your code is having a problem because of this. And it's like, yo, dude, you wrote this. The code. Not me. Like, let's
getting a little passive aggressive.
Yeah, I actually have I have gotten irritated a couple of times where I go, this is not my code. You created this. He's like, yeah, you're right, I did. But your code is still messed up here. And it's like, all right. But
it was your prompt.
Right, exactly. But, so
how familiar would you say you were with Python before you started using Copilot and finding, I guess my question is like, how much do I need to know to understand when a Copilot is going bad?
This process has actually taught me I was a lot more familiar with Python than I realized. But it's also taught me that I don't know as much as I think I do too. For example, a friend of mine was like, "Oh yeah, you need to use start working with Pydantic sort of code." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I don't know what the heck that is." And so I told Copilot, "Hey, make sure this is not only Pythonic but adheres to Pydantic as well." And it started doing a bunch of stuff that I got lost in. I was so confused. I'm like, I don't know what any of these models are. I don't know what's going on here. I know it's trying to validate the data and all this stuff, and that's great, but I lost all the logic, and I couldn't follow it very well.
I'm not familiar with Pydantic, although I've heard the term. Can you give us a
to the best of my understanding, even though I just admitted I don't know, it's a way to model the data within the code itself and to validate it. I think it's a lot of you're basically trying to make sure a string is a string, an integer is an integer, and you can build different models. Like you can reusable models, you can say, oh, hey, this is what a router dictionary looks like, and you can send the information there. It gets formatted the way it's supposed to be and comes back, and the rest of the code can kind of go with that. Unfortunately, things keep moving around and changing between classes and stuff, or between modules, and I get confused too easily. I did have to go back and tell Copilot, like, remove all the pedantic stuff. And once it did that, I started to be able to I was like, make this more simple. And I started to be able to read it and follow it much better. You know, that is caveated by as long as I'm asking it to do stuff I already understand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I understand how my database works. I understand how my API works. I understand how my network works. Now, I do have to go to Copilot and say, hey, I need you to give me a function to turn this circuit up into an existing bundle. This is what the database table you need to touch is. This is where all the columns are. This is what the values need to be, because it doesn't know any of that. And as long as I walk it through and guide it through all that, it'll do it. And eventually, if I ask it enough, it kind of figures out, and I don't have to give it as much. But when I tell it, I need you to grab all that and process this data, and I give it the sample data set and say, they need these 5 counters out of it, it will go it'll give me the output to do that, and it'll give it to me in like seconds as opposed to me taking half an hour to write it. So that's where the speed kind of comes in and the savings comes in. And so you can kind of, you know, prompt it through with a little bit of guidance and go, this is what I need. It'll give it what you want really, really fast. As long as you're able to like understand what it's giving you and you can verify that, yeah, that is doing what I expect it to do. Or if it doesn't do if it doesn't give you what you expect it to give you, you also need to be able to figure out what's going on. Sometimes you can give it the error message and it will go, oh yeah, this is what the problem is. And other times it's like, oh, I have no idea, you know. So.
Yeah, my take was it spit out a bunch of code that would have taken me a long time to get written just because trying to remember syntax and getting the flow right and all that. So you get this great starting point that maybe doesn't work, but as long as you know what you're looking at, it's much quicker to, I see what it did wrong, and tweak that or prompt it to fix the thing.
Exactly.
And, off it goes.
And these days, my browser's not full of tabs of me searching for Python code anymore.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Digging through Stack Overflow at this point because it already ingested all the Stack Overflow.
And I'll say over the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks since GPT 4.1 came out, that's been a huge change. That's been much better than the previous models, and it's just like pumping things out. I'm like, ooh, what the heck's going on? Yeah. Now, this last, or about a month ago in the Network Automation Forum Slack, one guy, Mark Prosser, he posts the Humble bundles when the cool tech stuff comes out, you know, and I made the comment because a couple of them come out back to back, and I grabbed them and I made the comments like, I keep buying these, but I'm never going to read all these books.
Notebook LM, baby.
Right, and so Chris Grundeman's like, oh, you just make a local LLM to process all that and ask questions. And I'm like, I actually didn't think about that. And so last Friday, I started building one using Copilot. And so that gets into what I was talking about earlier. As long as I know what's supposed to happen, it's easier to use. But I don't know anything about building an LLM, especially one locally in Docker, to process PDFs. So I'm asking it to do all these things, and it's doing things I don't understand. But I am... Through the troubleshooting process, I am learning a little bit out of it, and it's taking me longer to do this one. This is why this is a side project, but I am learning a little bit out of it. I'm learning a little bit about it. I'm learning I had to go troubleshoot a ChromaDB issue, and I don't know anything about ChromaDB, a vector database. So that was like I had to go find that information myself, and things. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning a little bit out of it, out of that process at least. So it's not all for naught,
Earlier in our conversation, you made a really intriguing point where if people are calling you or someone in the organization for support, hey, you got to have run the agreed upon process now. Right. We need you to hit this automation. Why didn't you do that?
Right.
How long did it take to get to that point where the expectation was we are leaning into the automation to find an answer or to at least gather information and so on?
Pretty quick. One of the things that I think the first month, so when I started doing router upgrades, which was the big one that was kind of like not a just collect data and process it, store it sort of thing, which is what vendor TAC collection kind of is just put data in a text file, right? Router upgrades is actually touching things and doing things and shutting traffic down and, affecting change and customer affecting change, even then. And so one of the things I did was for the first month of, I started with doing Juniper router upgrades first. I didn't do all 3 vendors, just Juniper first. And the first month was me doing upgrades for a couple of weeks with it in production. I've been doing it in test for like 6 months while I was building it, and I literally got to a point for 6 weeks where the tests never failed in my test environment, and I went, "This is too good. This can't be good to go. This is not perfect yet. Something's wrong." And so I finally went, "Okay, it's been 6 weeks. I have not had a test fail. I've been doing multiple tests every day." So I said, "Let's go to production. And if there's any problems, we'll figure them out." And so we went to production. Of course, I spent 2 weeks having problems on the first week I had problems on every single upgrade. Because not every router is built the same, even though it's the same hardware and software and OS version and configs. So they've all got their own little personalities and quirks. And I also learned really quickly on a global network when you're running your playbook in Dallas and you're trying to upgrade routers in the far-flung reaches of the network in Eastern Europe or Sydney or Singapore or Tokyo or wherever else, that latency is a problem. And things take a while, and I kind of forgot that. And my biggest issue was trying to figure out how long for timeouts to wait. Oh, that 30-second timeout's fine. Yeah, when your playbook is in Dallas and your test router is in Dallas, that's fine. But when you're in Singapore, that router needs like 2 minutes. So, so those kinds of things had to figure out the hard way. And luckily, it was one of those where I fixed the code and restart the task and moving right along, and we're good to go. So I had it all open in front of me and was able to do that really quickly. And that's one of the things, like, I did not understand this until like maybe a couple of months ago, but I was reading this book about the Tokyo production system, and they talking about this concept of, I'm probably going to mangle this, but Jidoko, which is automation with a human touch. And they've been doing this since like late 1800s with automatic looms, where, if the loom breaks, they will go in and fix it and also take the time to figure out why it broke and try to prevent it from breaking the same way again. So I'm doing the same thing with my automation tasks. Like, okay, why did this task break? Okay, let me fix it. Let me redo the logic a little bit to make sure it doesn't kind of break the same way again, if at all possible. Sometimes it's the router's the problem, and you go, oh, okay, once this gets reset, this problem won't happen again because it's now within the same, it's the automation has kind of set it up the same way everything else is set up. So, but that kind of concept of automation with that human touch is something I'm really passionate about, because everyone's so afraid the AI is going to replace them and the automation is going to replace them, but automation can't do everything we do. I don't see automation replacing a line card that went dead anytime soon. I see it ordering one and getting one sent to the site, but I don't see it getting replaced. Things like, if it's going to break, well, we got to figure out why it's broken. We got to make sure what can we do to prevent that breakage from happening. And so that's something that I think is very important, and we're always going to be needed for that. So.
Well, you're on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Where else can people find you?
LinkedIn. That's about it.
That's it.
I'm also in the Packet Pushers Slack channel. I'm in the Network to Code Slack channel, the USNUA Slack channel, the Network Automation Forum Slack channel.
Yeah.
So I'm in the NTT Gen Slack channel. Oh yeah, you don't have access to that. So those are the places I can be reached. I sometimes pipe up and say things and talk, but I'm always around and always communicable or reachable. So
yeah. Okay. And baby steps. It's funny. I said in the intro, hey, if you want to get started with automation, this is a good podcast for you to listen to. We might have overwhelmed some people, but to go back to the way you started, it was just one small thing at a time and then iterating.
Yeah. It's funny is about a year and a half ago, I was like, I've only been automating for like a couple of years, all this stuff. And then I'm sitting in Amsterdam at AutoCon 1, and I'm sitting there. I can't remember which talk it was, but somebody said something, and I went, oh, wait a second. I've been automating for a really long time. Like, to the point where, like, I was only focusing on the automation I worked on, not the stuff I was already using, like the configuration management system we have. It's an automation. It's building things for us. It's doing things. I've been using, it's other people's bash scripts, but I've been altering them to do things I want. I started writing Python in 2017 by writing a script to replace all those bash scripts to query the database to get a bunch of data out for everybody, and that's a 3,000 line beast now, so I've automated my house in 2019. So, I mean, it's all these things I've been automating for a very long time and just never really dawned on me that that's what that was. And so I think most people they just don't realize it, or they're not viewing that as automation because they didn't build it themselves. But yeah, you're right. Start small, pick one little low-hanging fruit thing and go with it, and, start one building block at a time. It's a Lego thing. So,
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the time. Before we hit the record button, you had a horrendous flight to get over here. Just things did not go your way, and you're tired, and you're jet lagged, and all the rest of it. This is a fantastic discussion. Thank you very much. And thanks to you out there for listening to Heavy Networking. I've been Ethan Banks along with Drew Conway Murray. You can follow us on LinkedIn or the Packet Pushers Community Slack, which you can join at packetpushers.net/community. And if you got topics you want us to cover in this show or comments about this episode, including your actuallys, you can send them to us via packetpushers.net/follow-up, and much appreciated for doing that. We appreciate all the comments that come through. Please do all the things. You can buy merch at store.packetpushers.net. Like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends. Join the Packet Pushers Slack group I just mentioned. And check out our growing YouTube channel, by the way. You can listen to or watch our podcast, as well as original video content demonstrating products or us fiddling in the lab. You can follow us on LinkedIn. All those things help us keep doing what we do here in a world of fractured attention. And last but not least, remember that too much networking would never be enough.